Well, good afternoon. This is my second attempt at trying to record an Industrial Revolution lecture because the first one lost its connection. Won't come back. Let's try this again. The United States, after the War of 1812, entered a very prosperous time. We were able to industrialize, which meant that we increased manufacturing, production. Our economy is going to grow. But in order to have that industrial revolution, four things needed to be in place. Number one, you have to have a stable government, which we did. We had come out of a war, a second war with Great Britain, having beaten them a second time. We were doing okay. So you have to have a stable government. Number two, you have to have a stable economy. People that are employed have money in their pocket, willing to spend. An economy that will have financing, willing to put out money to increase startup businesses, to expand existing businesses. So number one, stable government. Number two, stable economy. Number three, you have to have manpower. You need the people to be able to work in those factories. And then those people who are working have paychecks and have some money to spend. Number four, you have to have natural resources. You can't truly fully industrialize if you're dependent upon some other country to supply one of your main products, such as timber to build the factories. Well, we have it all. Between the North and the South, we had everything we needed to industrialize. Now this is going to be a real radical change for us because when we founded at the American Revolution, 9 out of every 10 men were farmers. Even John Adams, who was a lawyer by profession, was a farmer by trade. We were built on the idea that we work the earth, we work to make ourselves who we want to become. And that was self-sufficient. That's what we wanted to become. We wanted to be self-sufficient. And that really typified our attitude. So this Industrial Revolution, when it gets going, it's going to change our makeup as a society, as a country. One of those guys who contributed was Eli Whitney. Eli was a teacher in the South, which meant he worked on a plantation for someone who was wealthy. He would tutor their children. And working on the plantation, he saw the cotton production and what it all entailed. Now, Eli, you're going, Eli Whitney, I know that name, I know that name. Well, in grade school, you probably learned Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, which isn't completely accurate. Eli Whitney adapted plans for cotton gins which were in existence in the Caribbean before they ever made it here. And we were using Caribbean cotton gins, but they weren't working very well because our cotton is different than theirs. It all has to do with the silk factor. So the cotton that we're trying to put through these gins, which shreds the cotton to make it into fibers, wasn't working. He figured out a gin that would work. The problem was he didn't get a patent on it, so he never really made any money on it. But by doing this, by working on the cotton gin, and by having the Industrial Revolution going on, he was able to come up with something else that was huge, made him lots of money, and impacted us. Eli Whitney is going to mass produce guns. Muskets that have been used, if anything broke on it, you had to take it in and have that piece, that particular piece, rebuilt, refitted to your gun, and most often you had to buy a whole new gun. This was not efficient, especially if we're going to have a standing army. So Eli, what he did was he came up with the idea of interchangeable parts. He made a gun that if the stock broke, you go to the gun master, you go to the gunnery, and you get a new stock. if your ball got stuck in the barrel and now the barrel's unusable, which, okay, that's not a probable scenario, but let's say that's what happened, then you go to the gunnery and you take that barrel off, you put the new one on, and off you go. Very quick. It won't take so long. So what he did, he promised 10,000 of these particular guns to the United States government. So prior to him, all muskets were custom made. Now, he was given $5,000. He does a demonstration with 10 muskets. That contract was then got him $30,000, which at that time $30,000 made him very rich. So he is going to impact our military by having interchangeable parts in the muskets and the guns. The other thing that happens in an industrial revolution is that you go from using hand tools to machines. The machines are most going to impact the textile industry. In the 1700s, a guy by the name of James Hargreaves, that's spelled Hargreaves, he was in England in the 1700s. He created the spinning jenny, like the girl's name, the spinning jenny. Kind of looks like a spinning wheel, but it is going to, spinning wheels could make yarn. His spinning jenny could make thread, mass-produced thread. So this is going to advance the textile industry. Then in 1785, a guy by the name of Richard Arkwright, Arkwright, he figured out how to use a water frame to power his textile factory. Think of a water wheel, you know, the great big round water wheel, and it has those little buckets in it, and it picks up the water, and then when it dumps, it keeps it going. Well, by keeping this wheel going, that wheel then is turning an axle inside the factory, which is then turning the machines in the factory. That was Richard Arkwright. Great Britain was the leader in the textile industry in the 1700s. They were truly the only ones that were manufacturing. And they held a monopoly on the industry because what they did was they made employees had to sign waivers that whatever they saw that went on in the factory, you know, whatever their position was, they wouldn't take it somewhere else to a competitor. If you were going to leave your job, your boss had the right to A or nay your next job. So everything was sworn to secrecy. What they forgot to do was the janitor. They forgot to swear the janitor to secrecy. Guy by the name of Samuel Slater, S-L-A-T-E-R. He was a British mechanic. He memorized everything that went on in that factory because he was the one that had to fix things that broke. He was there. He saw everything. He came over to America with all of that knowledge. He started his own textile industry over here. He hooked up with, I know he had a partner, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name, but Samuel Slater's the guy to know because he's the one that is going to revolutionize our industry then, our textile industry, because think about it, we had the cotton in the South, all industries in the North, so the South could send the cotton to the North and we could produce. We could bypass Great Britain, make some more money. But as these factories get built, and they need manpower, and of course the owners don't want to have to pay for manpower, they went to what is known as the Rhode Island system. Rhode Island system, employing children to work in these factories. Children between the ages of 6 and 12 worked 8-hour days, 5 days a week. They made, on the average, 30 cents a week. An adult would make $1 to $2 a week. And these children were in charge of carrying the baskets, replacing bobbins, carrying things through the factory. They were the gophers. Go for this, go for that. Oh no. Oops, sorry. My screen went black. I hope I'm still here. Sorry about that. So they were the gophers. And so many of them lost fingers and toes because they'd be carrying their full load. And they'd be going across the floor, and if they tripped, don't you normally, you would drop what you're carrying, put your hands out to try and save yourself. The problem is, when they put their hands out, their hands would be going into a machine that would cut their finger off, something like this. So, and working 8-hour days means they weren't getting any school. So we're going to go through an entire generation of uneducated people that this Industrial Revolution, while it advances our economy and does so much for us that way, it really brings us down in our society. Francis Cabot Lodge, another name to remember, Francis Cabot Lodge. He didn't like the idea of these children working in the factories, children not being raised by their parents, not getting an education. So what he did was he pushed from getting the children out, let's let women work. Open up the door for women. Francis Cabot Lodge, pushing women. This will be the early 1800s. It'll be known as the Lowell System, L-O-W-E-L-L, Lowell System. Mostly unmarried women. They would live in dormitories together. They would live at the factory site. And this is one of the first opportunities for women to get out of the home, unmarried women, to get out of the home, make some money. And this also made the United States progressive in allowing women to work. The Industrial Revolution, some of the improvements that it made for us, we went from using leather transmission belts to, we went from using wooden transmission belts to using leather transmission belts. Wood would catch on fire, so a lot of machines were lost that way, and the leather was actually lasted longer, could handle more friction, and machines can run faster. Wood gears were replaced by metal gears. They last longer. Nails. The thing about nails, they were all hand stamped. And once someone figured out how to make a mold with nail molds, you know, and then you pour your iron over this mold, and then you fire off a mold, you break open your mold, and all these nails come out instead of making each one by hand. That's going to really improve on our construction. We're going to have more construction. Nails get cheaper. And as much as we industrialized and grew, corporations didn't come into existence until the late 1800s. So everything was still pretty much family run and small on scale. Now, I'm very fond of saying nothing happens within a vacuum. Everything has a ripple effect. That's my saying from learning history. The Industrial Revolution is going to ripple over into education. In the South, all education was through private tutoring. On the frontiers, as we're expanding west, there was no school. Everybody worked every day just to survive. A guy by the name of Horace Mann, Horace, H-O-R-A-C-E, Mann, M-A-N-N. The year's 1850. He is going to advocate for free educational system, grades 1 through 8. An 8th grade education was pretty much all you needed to advance yourself in society back then. So he advocated, and he's going to promote this, and we're going to have what's going to be known as the Common Public School. Businesses encouraged people to get education so that businesses could advance. Things that the Industrial Revolution also changed was the paper mills. Everything used to be printed on actual material. So newspapers that were called rags, it's because the material itself was like was like a fiber. And once we could produce paper, then that goes much cheaper. People can actually afford to buy newspapers. We're going to have colleges are going to spring up in around the mid-1800s, coming out of this Industrial Revolution. Colleges in Ohio, by 1850, we have 25 colleges. The oldest college in Ohio is 1804. That would be the Ohio University. The thing was that most of these colleges weren't really teaching you anything useful. Does that sound familiar? People were learning Greek. People were learning dead languages, things they just couldn't use. So it's going to be Brown University. Brown University is going to step up and say, you know what, we need to teach math. We need to teach science. This is what's going to advance our education and advance our society and advance our country. And that's what they did. Another area that's going to get affected is the medical field, medical revolution. A guy by the name of Ephraim McDowell. Ephraim McDowell, he did a surgery on a woman who everybody thought was pregnant. Come to find out, it was an ovarian tumor. And when he removed that tumor, she was able to live for 32 more years. Thing is, now remember, these surgeries, they don't use anesthesia. Ouch. In 1822, now this is the one, you don't have to remember McDowell's. And in fact, these things I'm really giving to you because I just find this kind of stuff fascinating, that the Industrial Revolution ripples out into the medical field. And here's the good one. In 1822, an Army sergeant, Dr. Beaumont, he has a hunter coming into him. Hunter's got a stomach wound. He'd been shot. It was an accident. Doc determines this guy is not going to live. Here's a great learning opportunity. Puts him on his table, kind of pulls back the wound, and realizes he can see into the stomach. And he can see that tube that leads from when we swallow, it goes down into the stomach. And no one really knew, okay, when your food starts out as solid, goes into your mouth and goes out the other end, what happens to it in between? No one knew. And we're talking 1822. So what he did, he took some food, tied it onto a string, and he dropped it inside that flap, closed the flap up, and every couple hours he'd open it up and he'd see how that food was being digested, and he's the one that determined, well, there must be some kind of a chemical. There's some kind of an acid in our stomach that breaks down the solid food. That's how we learn how the stomach works. Now, remember I told you how these surgeries are done with no anesthesia. They would typically make the patient chug some whiskey, hopefully until they passed out. Oh, please, trust me, I could drink enough until I passed out. I don't drink at all, so it would take about 5 swallows and I'd be out and I wouldn't feel a thing. So anesthesia was around, it just wasn't used for surgery. It was a laughing gas that was used at parties. People of means, people who had money, would hold parties and they'd say, hey, come to my house. I've got some laughing gas. Let's have some fun. And you'd be at the party and someone would get a little too rowdy and maybe punch someone else, and that other person would say, you punched me. I didn't feel it. Ha ha ha. It doesn't even hurt. I got this laughing gas in me. It doesn't even hurt. Doesn't even hurt. It took them a long time to figure out that how they felt at these parties, why don't we put it into the medical field? Doesn't even hurt. Go ahead and punch me as hard as you can. You can punch me in the nose. I can't even feel it. Light bulb goes on. Took a while though. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to my computer. I'm going to type up a lecture on cities. So what's going on with the Industrial Revolution is at about the same time as our cities are growing. So that's the end of this lecture. Thanks for hanging in there with me.